I hit the pause button and I started to think about what I needed to do to be healthy. And Alex, what happened was I realized that the healthcare system doesn't bring it to you. This is Sick Health with Kevin Ban, MD. Our show helps you navigate our broken healthcare system and take control of your own health. Hi, I'm Kevin Ban, an emergency physician with over 25 years of clinical experience. Most recently, I was the chief medical officer at Walgreens, where I led the national pandemic response.
Hi, everyone. I'm Alex Wallace. I'm a longtime journalist. I was an executive at NBC News and most recently at Yahoo.
Our healthcare system is broken. So our goal of this show will be to help keep you and your family out of the healthcare system. But there will be times when you need to navigate care, and we're going to be there to help you.
The best way for you to support the show at no cost is by following us and subscribing to us, which is at Sick Health with Kevin Ban, MD on YouTube.
Alex, I want to start off and just thank you for being a part of this journey. You know that I've been in healthcare for, around 30 years now. And I've tried very hard, along with others, to impact it in a positive direction. And yet I still think that it's a really difficult system that it always, doesn't always serve us. I thought that this would be an opportunity to talk about our healthcare system so that we could make it better, and equally as important, so we could help people navigate through it. And so I started to think, who's someone who could be my partner in this? We've known each other for 25 years. You've had an awesome career in media, and I know that you will keep me honest and ask me a ton of questions. So thanks for coming along on this journey.
Well, thank you for having me. At some point, we'll have to tell the story of how we met, but I would say even just our first conversation 25 years ago, we started to kick ideas back and forth even then, and we've been doing it ever since. The first case we're going to discuss today are the 6 things you can do now to increase your chances of staying out of the hospital, which we said is one of the major goals of this show. But we're going to start with actually the opposite, which is a group of patients that Kevin treated in a Boston hospital that got him to focus on his own health.
Alex, this happened about 12 years ago. And the first thing you should know about me, or probably doctors in general, is that we don't often see ourselves in our patients. It's a firewall that's necessary. You want us to be objective. And what happened was back in 2012, I had a series of patients, 3 patients that came in over the course of a month. All 3 of them men, all of them a bit older than me at the time. And what was interesting is that I kind of saw myself in those patients. All 3 of them had a heart attack. And quite honestly, I stopped, I slowed down, and I was like, hey, number 1, I put on weight. Number 2, I'm super stressed out. Number 3, I'm not getting enough sleep. I'm working nights, weekends, and holidays, and my diet is terrible. So I hit the pause button and I started to think about what I needed to do to be healthy. And Alex, what happened was I realized that the healthcare system doesn't bring it to you. And the reason it doesn't is because we have something called a fee-for-service model, which means we pay when things kind of go wrong, or we pay for tests and interventions and studies, but we don't, pay for wellness and for prevention. And so I had to do it myself.
Okay, so basically we all have to become more involved in our own healthcare and our own health. I know there are 6 pillars that you say are very important to our health. I'm already nervous because 6 is a lot, so you're going to help us prioritize them. But could you just start by explaining to me what the 6 pillars are?
So the 6 pillars of health are sleep, diet, exercise, stress mitigation, and behavioral health type issues, relationship building, and then there is a medical component. It is one of the 6. And you're absolutely right, Alex. It's impossible to go after all 6 at once. And so what I really recommend people do is just to sort of do an assessment and say like, hey, where am I with sleep? Where am I with diet? Where am I with exercise? How are my relationships? How stressed am I? And then choose 2. Not more than 2. Otherwise, it's impossible. We're all trying to find balance, and I think we need to get there slowly.
Okay, Dr. Ban, pillar 1, sleep. I just want to start by saying that right before COVID, a colleague of mine at Yahoo was wearing a ring called the Oura ring. I've got it on my finger, and I started wearing it. And I wear it as a sleep tracker. And it is fascinating. It has completely changed how I sleep because I now know I have to get into bed at the same time, and I have to get up at the same time, and I can see the quality of my sleep. And if I eat too close to sleep, I don't sleep well. And if I look at my screen too close to bed, I don't sleep well. So it is foundational to our health, sleep. Can you explain to me why exactly that is?
Yeah, I would start by saying, hey, do you smoke? Okay. And if you smoke, folks, pump the brakes and you got to work on that. But to your point, it is so fundamental to who we are and what we do that I would say start with sleep and make sure that you're sleeping adequately. And you pointed it out, Alex, right? Like you oftentimes need to have an objective tracker. You're using the Oura Ring. It's not the only one. The Apple Watch does this. Fitbit does this. Garmin does this. There's so many, but it's good to get some objective data about how well you're sleeping. And I would start there and stay there until it's adequate.
Could you just walk us through what is the physiology of sleep? How does sleep work, actually?
Yeah, it's a great question. Why do we sleep? And so there's some really interesting and important things that happen when we're sleeping. You would think that we shut down completely. It's not true. There's a lot happening. The first thing is that we're storing and we're solidifying memories. So this is, you've kind of heard about when you study, make sure you get a good night of sleep after. There've been a lot of studies that suggest that when you do that, you embed and solidify memories. What's really interesting, and later in an upcoming episode, we're going to have my very good friend and colleague, John Cronin, a sleep expert, come and talk to us about sleep. He and I, a few years back, spent 2 hours just talking about why we sleep. And what was the most interesting piece of it is that during sleep, the brain cleanses itself, okay? It has fluid that sort of rapidly flows through it, and it's flushing out toxins. It's sort of a cleansing mechanism. So that's a really important reason why we sleep. Now, and another thing here, when we start to think about the other pillars of diet and exercise, there are neurotransmitters that are impacted when we don't sleep. Two of them, ghrelin and leptin. Okay, ghrelin is often referred to as the hunger hormone. So when we're not getting enough sleep, interestingly, ghrelin, which causes us to have more appetite and which causes us to store more fat, goes up. Okay. And leptin, which decreases our appetite, which decreases the storage of fat, goes down. So when you're not sleeping, you're actually driving your appetite up and you're storing fat more. So this is kind of a really big deal. And it makes it harder to achieve the other pillars.
Okay. Pillar number 2, what we eat. Here again, I'm going to start with my new tracking obsession. So you and I started talking about this show a few months back, and you came to stay with us, and you noticed that I maybe don't eat always the best foods that I could eat. I'm trying to put it in a way that doesn't insult my eating habits too badly. And you told me about an app, I think it's called Lose It, but there are lots of apps like this where it just tracks actually what you're eating. And it made me realize I've paid attention to calories and obviously for years, but I never really thought about what are called macros, which is the composition of even every single meal. Could you explain why those matter?
Yeah, well, I think where you were when I came for that visit a few weeks ago is where most people are. And that is that they're thinking about calories, but calories are not created equally. And so you have to give some thought into the breakdown between protein, carbohydrate, and fat. Now, that is absolutely 100% impossible to do unless you have some sort of tool. You mentioned Lose It. You and I are both using that right now, but there are others. There's Noom, MyFitnessPal. It doesn't matter. They all do the same thing. And there, I think the goal ought to be 30%, somewhere around 33% protein, a third carbohydrate, and the same of fat. And that's where I would start. And so all the time you hear about high protein diets and low fat or really avoid carbs. I think you're looking for balance here. And Alex, this is something I want to say about our show. We are not the ones that are looking for perfection. We're looking for balance. All of us are trying to figure out how to balance things in our lives. And I would include the 6 pillars. You cannot do all of these at once. And so, start somewhere, maybe 1, maybe 2, start tracking it, and then start moving the needle on it a bit.
Okay, I said we're not going to discuss diet and we won't that much, but I have to say I have learned how little protein I eat by tracking it and how important protein is. And now I'm obsessed. I think you de-thaw frozen shrimp sometimes for a snack. I'm like, every snack and meal, I'm trying to figure out how I can get protein in because it's just not something I had actually focused on without realizing that protein, particularly as you age, is really important for your muscles.
Once you start doing this, you'll realize how hard it is to get enough protein. So you need to have some tips and some tricks in order to do that. And I would say, Alex, that's a bigger theme of the whole show here, which is when you act proactively, when you're not reacting, you can actually drive a better outcome. Now, if you're sort of traveling and you're trying to buy things on the fly, it's really difficult. Even if you're at home and you're not thinking about what you're eating and what's the percentage of carbohydrate and fat and protein, it's hard. So this will take a little bit of work. What I found is that I easily get to meals that I love and that have the right combination, and then I just kind of rely on those. And that's a really good place to start.
I actually printed out a list the other day of the 20 easiest places to get protein, and I've just found finding ways to stick them in my diet. Okay, sugar. I know sugar is the one other thing we really need to think about in diet. I think most of us know that too much sugar is not a good thing, but could you explain to us the physiology of sugar?
Right. So I think one of the most important themes that are emerging or that is emerging right now in diet is keeping your blood glucose, that's sugar, and your insulin stable. Okay. So what you want to avoid is eating food that is going to then shoot up your blood glucose, again, sugar, and then is going to also push it up the insulin. So maybe a little physiology here, and let's talk about hormones for a second. And maybe even before we go into the hormone insulin, let's talk about hormones in general. I think of hormones as this substance that's produced in the body, travels to its target site, and then creates an action. Okay. Think about it in your house as almost like the electrical system. You have outlets, right? Those are the receptor. Those are the hormone receptors. So if you want the action of turning on your light, you go ahead and you plug it in the lamp into the receptor and the light goes on. That is exactly how hormone works. Now let's talk about insulin because that's what stabilizes blood glucose. So when you eat, there are signals that go to your pancreas, and your pancreas will then will produce insulin. And then insulin will go off in your body, and it really does a couple of different things, or the most important thing it does is it'll store that sugar, that blood glucose, as energy. And it does that in your liver, it does it in your muscles, and it does it in your fat. Okay. And so insulin, I think of that as almost like a key to a door. So you have this glucose floating around, the sugar floating around in your blood. It needs to get into the cells of the liver, of your muscles, of the fat. And so insulin unlocks the door, and the glucose can go inside to be stored later for energy.
Okay, so we now know that I'm a little obsessed with tracking. So here's my question about insulin. I think you can now I don't know if you can get it at the drugstore, but I think that there are some people, I know diabetics track their insulin constantly, but I think there are actually commercial products now where you can track your glucose. Is that something that I should try? Is that like, forget it, I just need to get up and brush my teeth and go for a walk? Or is that something you think is smart?
Yeah. So interestingly, I want to make a plug, first of all, that all diabetics should be monitoring their glucose. And what you're referring to is a CGM, a continuous glucose monitor. Okay. And interestingly, diabetics, you would think that all diabetics are doing that, and only about 30% of diabetics are using a CGM. Okay. So let's start with the diabetics and let's make sure that they are tracking their blood glucose to keep it stable. Okay. But you're right. There's this new trend, and people are beginning to wear these monitors. Now, I've not done it, although I actually had a company send me a monitor, and I just haven't done it yet. But I thought, and the reason I haven't done it yet is because I thought it would be a really interesting thing to do for the show. And the reason I would do it, and the reason why I think it's reasonable to consider it, is that we don't always know how different foods impact our blood glucose and therefore, our insulin. And so I may eat a banana and not see much of a spike in glucose and therefore not of insulin, whereas you might have a huge spike. And there may be other foods that trigger. So you can actually watch this. Now, my buddy did this, and I this is a warning, like red flag people, like do not get obsessed with this. It's sort of a directional thing where you can learn something a little bit more about your body so that you can curate what you eat.
I'm immediately thinking like that I'm running out to the drugstore right after to buy one. Okay. I mean, are they actually commercially available?
Yes, there are different companies, and I think you and I should do a whole segment
I
on
agree.
this.
Okay, deal.
But yes, they're out there, and you can get them. Correction. Alex went out as soon as we finished filming this episode because she actually wanted to get a continuous glucose monitor. And while it was approved in the first week of March by the FDA, it will not be available until the summer of 24. So there's still a couple of months until you can actually get it. But then I'll tell you what, folks, I'm going to try it. Alex is going to try it. And we hope that maybe you'll consider trying it and we can exchange notes. And again, I think it's reasonable if you're trying to learn something. Don't go too far, folks.
No, I just think I think it's all interesting. Okay. Next thing we're going to discuss is exercise. Again, not something if there are 20,000 diet channels on YouTube, there are probably 50,000 exercise channels. That's not what we're going to be doing. I have very few qualifications for anything involving exercise. I do enough, but not excessive. But I wanted to talk to you about muscles because my whole life I played sports in college. I've been pretty in shape my whole life, but I never, and maybe it's because I'm in middle age that I've begun to think or been told that muscles are really important versus just doing yoga and being flexible and going running and getting cardio, but actually like some form of lifting weights. Obviously, I'm late to the party on this one. Why do muscles matter so much?
Yeah, muscles really do matter. And when you take a look at longevity, and there are people who do a great job of talking about this. Peter Attia does a really nice job of talking about longevity in general. And we're going to link to him in our show notes. And he does some really good stuff on resistance training. So this is the first shout out to Chev. I'd like to introduce her, everyone. Batsheva Gez is our producer. And so Chev, let's make a note to drop into the show notes Peter Attia's YouTube channel where he talks about resistance training. Why? Well, because resistance training really matters because as we age and it starts in our 30s, early 40s, we begin to lose muscle mass, but not only, we begin to lose bone mass. Okay. And for women who have osteoporosis, this can really be a problem. So resistance training matters. Now, what does that mean? Everyone right away has this idea that like, I need to pump weights, I need to bench and squat. And that is resistance training. If it works for you, it's great. But quite honestly, so is, body weight exercises like doing planks, like doing burpees. I hate burpees. I force myself to do burpees. So body weight works, lunges and squats. But so do bands. I talked to my mom this morning because I knew we were going to do this. And I was like, Mom, what do you guys do in your workout class? And she described to me that, and she's 82 years old, that they are using bands. It's all resistance training. It is all good. Now, Alex, and I feel like I'm talking a lot here, but I'll give you one more thing. There's some really good things that come up from resistance training. The first is that you're going to be building muscle and bone. And as we said, the muscle strength really correlates with longevity as we get older. So that matters. But it also promotes metabolism. So a lot of people want to lose weight. And what you find is when you do resistance training of any of the sort that I mentioned, you're burning calories even later after you're done working out. And then the other thing I think about is we always have this idea of like weightlifting is like the bodybuilder who's super inflexible, and completely wrong. We were thinking that was wrong. Actually, when you are doing resistance training, you are definitely increasing mobility and flexibility. That matters too.
This has been a fascinating process, like prepping for these shows and talking to you more frequently, which is great. I also feel like I'm getting free medical advice. So thank you very much, Dr. Ban. But it's actually made me think a lot about my dad. So my dad, who's actually staying with me today, is 91. he is in remarkable shape. And, I'm sure some of it's genetics. He's careful about what he eats. But do you know that since he was 40 years old, he has done resistance training every single morning, 7 days a week? And so this weekend, I was saying to him and my mom, I really think that's got to be a part of it. He hasn't had falls. He's got very good balance. He still works. And I'm sure it's just fascinating. And I'm not sure why exactly he started doing it. Someone told him it was good for him, but it's clearly benefited him.
Yeah, I mean that's how you get to be 91 years old, right? Is that, I know this about your dad too. He's like very involved intellectually and cognitively. He's still working and he's still traveling, and that's what we're going to advocate for here. Folks, look, we understand that for the most part you're trying to manage your kids, you're trying to manage your own health, you're trying to manage your parents. We're all doing that, and so we're going to have to talk this out. Alex, one thing I would say is your dad probably does a mix of things. And recently you've been hearing like, no, don't do cardio. You've got to lift weights. And I think here it's the and. Okay. So personally, I do a workout 3 times a week. You know this, where it's a high intensity interval training workout with a group of my friends. Okay. We do that Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. And I do that as much because it's good for me to get out of bed and go be with them. But it's the being with them that matters so much. And we're going to talk about relationships. So I'm a big fan of, do it all. I do yoga. I lift weights. I walk. I mean, there's so many things that you can do. Everyone's playing pickleball. I don't know if we should be a fan of that or not. It's fun. It's a lot of fun, by the way. But, I think variety is a great thing. Just make sure you're embedding that resistance.
Love it. Okay. Next thing on our pillars, the 6 pillars, is stress. So before we go into bad stress, I think we all think of stress and we think it's always bad. Is there any amount of stress that is actually good for us?
Yes, without question. And, the problem with it is if I say, hey, let's talk about stress and let's talk about distress, it's like, that all just sounds super stressful. So what I'm going to do is we're going to do a little bit of doctor stuff, and I'm going to let you all in on a secret. Okay. This is example. Okay. If you come in and you say, hey, I've got a sore throat, right? And I say, okay, hey, I've done my evaluation, and guess what? You have a sore throat. You're like, I'm not paying for that. Right. But folks, if I put it into Latin or Greek, then I can charge you
$500.
Hopefully not that much, but it can be. If I call it a pharyngitis, everyone's like, oh, I don't have a sore throat. I've got pharyngitis, right? So let's talk about some prefixes here, okay? And what I'm going to use, we talked about blood glucose earlier, and forgive me for this tangent, but I think it matters, okay? We were talking about blood glucose, and when I say to you, Alex, and I'm sorry to put you on the spot, hyperglycemia, what does it mean?
Too much.
Too much sugar, right? Glycemia, too much sugar. Okay. If I say to you hypoglycemia, what does it mean?
Too little sugar.
That's right. Right. So what is normal in the normal range of sugar? It's called euglycemia, euglycemia. So folks, just like pharyngitis, if I want to say you have normal blood glucose, I'll say you are euglycemic. Okay. And so let's talk about stress in that way. Okay. Not stress and distress. Let's talk about eustress and distress. Okay. Eustress is good, right? That is the test is coming up next week. I have a presentation at work and I am going to get out of bed and I'm going to go do the work. Eustress, normal range stress that you should expect. And, it gets us out of bed and it gets things done, right? So that's a good amount of stress. When you get into distress, then you're talking about something that's much more insidious. That's when you're not sleeping now as a result of that upcoming presentation or test that you have to take. You're not eating. This becomes abnormal. And so you really have to pay attention to that balance.
I mean, easier said than done. So, Dr. Ban, look, I do yoga and I'm obsessed with yoga, and it honestly has completely changed my stress levels and I love it. I mean, just even going into child's pose at the very beginning before I start a class, and I can feel my everything just starts to relax. What are other things besides that that are just kind of automatic stress reducers?
Well, of course, the place where we're going to start here is meditation. Okay. And I am raised by a woman who started, and my mom raised us as a single mother. I have three siblings, so the four of us. She got into meditation in 1972. Okay. So it would be impossible for me. And I started meditating when I was 9 years old. I don't meditate regularly now, everyone. I know that you thought I was going to go like, oh, I've been meditating since I was 9 years old. No, but I have used meditation throughout my life. In particular, I've done it during my residence. I did it during my residency. The two things that got me through my residency were yoga that you mentioned, and also meditation. My mom says that meditation, we do transcendental meditation, gives you about 4 hours of sleep. So be careful, she said to me today, and I have to shout this out. Don't do it too late in the afternoon. You might not be able to fall asleep because that's how, but it really does work, And so if every day since 1972, I shouldn't say every day. She said maybe not every day, but often now, even twice a day, she meditates. Okay. So consider meditation. We're going to talk a lot about it. Now, I've moved to something a little bit different than meditation, more mindfulness type stuff, because that really helps me. And I think mindfulness can really help us control some of those intrusive thoughts. Okay. The ones, for me, all of my thoughts are scarcity thoughts. Okay. Because as I was growing up, there just wasn't really enough money to make it happen all the time. And so I'm a scarcity guy, and as soon as I get that intrusive thought, like, you're not going to be able to afford the mortgage, you're not going to be able to, send your kid to school, that's the moment where like I have to identify that thought and say, hey, I recognize you, and then quiet that thought. And I'll tell you, that's a really important skill that we don't talk enough about. I went through a really difficult time in 2015 where I was under a tremendous amount of stress. And I found someone by the name of Shirzad Shamin. He is a professor out at Stanford. Would love to have him on the show. And he talked about some techniques. So actually, Chev, number 2, we're going to drop in a 1 hour. So if you can dedicate 1 hour video that is on YouTube that he did at Google. For me, quite honestly, it helped me tremendously. I want to avoid hyperbole and not say it changed my life, but boy, did it help me. And I think it might be worth checking out.
One other thing, flow states. I've heard a lot more about that. And that can be, I think you can get into one running, you can get into one doing pottery. Is that, does your brain function differently? Or is it just that you're so focused on what you're doing? It's just actually why I love yoga, because I'm so focused on making sure I don't fall on my face. And that, in Warrior One, that I keep my arms above my head, that it really is distracting. Is that what a flow state is?
That's exactly what it is. And I don't think it matters what you're doing. I've heard people say that pottery, painting, people who cycle. I love to ski. Folks, we're going to be talking about skiing on this show because I love to do it. And the only thing I'm thinking about is the next turn that I have to make in 10 feet. Okay. I'm not thinking about my mortgage. I'm not thinking about, any of my stresses. I'm just tuned out. Okay. And you need to turn your brain off. And we're going to go deeper into the physiology of this, but you've got to figure out a way to turn off your brain and give it some rest. And that's the flow state.
Got it. Okay. Next pillar, number 5, is relationships, which I think are a phenomenal thing for us to think about. And I do think during COVID, there was the crisis of loneliness, and we all really started talking about loneliness in a way we hadn't before. I want to start by just asking, I think isolation and loneliness are actually, we conflate them, but they're actually quite different things. Is that true?
That's 100% true. And I think it's a great place to start. They are absolutely adjacent, and they, without question, impact one another. But isolation is a very objective thing. Are you spending time with other people? How many times per day, per week, per month are you spending time with other people? It is objective. Whereas loneliness is a subjective feeling. Think about it for a second. If you are surrounded by people, and yet you feel lonely, and that can happen, and it is miserable, then you can see that there's a distinction between these. And there's also a distinction, Alex, in terms of the type of impact and effect they have on us. For isolation, that tends to be correlated much more with bad healthcare outcomes, including death. Okay. Like as people who are truly isolated and older than 65 years old have an exorbitantly high percentage of dying in a 4-year time frame. We're going to talk about that type of research. Loneliness is different. That is more the subjective feelings that lead to things like depression and anxiety, right? So people who are lonely oftentimes then have not so much like that risk of losing their life, but the risk of developing depression and some problems. Now, there's some overlap here. What's really interesting about the literature when you dig down deep is that if you're lonely, you're more likely to isolate yourself. And that goes to show you, and think about that, right? When you're lonely, you start to, feel like you can't be with other people. And so there's a lot of overlap here, and it'll be our job to help people kind of work their way through it.
Kevin, I have another question for you about relationships. I should have said at the beginning, and pillar number 5 being relationships. Presumably it's healthy relationships and not just any relationship.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't think it matters necessarily what type of relationship it is. Some people would say, like, is friendship okay? Is it a marriage? I think it doesn't matter. And Alex, we will deep dive into this and really make sure that people have a great understanding of it. But they do need to be healthy relationships. There's one thing that makes me laugh, which is a Saturday Night Live skit. I don't know how much you watch them, but they did something called Man Park. Did you ever see Man Park? We'll do it again. Chev, drop it into the show notes. But they did this really funny skit about men and how they don't really have relationships, and it's awkward for them. And so women take their man to the man park where they talk sports and do all the things. So it's but again, there's a hint of, if there's not a hint of truth in something, then it's just completely absurd. And so there's something about men, especially as we age, that we become more and more isolated. And so it's really important to make sure that you don't.
Okay. And I'm also learning that our 25-year friendship has been good for my health. So thank you, Dr. Van.
Thank you, Alex Wallace.
Number 6, that is a medical plan. And you are a doctor. I have obviously always had doctors, but I'd never thought of actually having a medical plan. I have a dentist. I have a primary care doctor. My kids have pediatricians. But could you walk me through, when you say everyone needs to have a medical plan, what exactly does that mean?
So I will start with, you must have a medical team, okay? And I know how difficult it is nowadays to find a primary care doctor, but you must have one. If you're having difficulty finding one, then I'm going to help you with that, okay? But it really starts there. You have to make sure that you are on the inside of this game. If you don't have a primary care doctor, then what'll happen is that anytime you need to access care, you're kind of on your own. Now, I need to really shout this out. In this country, we have over 8,000 medically underserved communities. That represents about 100 million Americans. That's about a third of our country, okay? I can tell you that I live in Eastern Massachusetts, just outside of Boston. 5-7 years ago, if you asked me for a PCP, I could probably help you get one. Now it's virtually impossible, even if they're concierge, okay? So it's not easy, but it's important. The next piece of that is that you kind of have to know what you're working on, and you have to know how to access care. Okay, so when is the time to call your primary care doctor? When is the time that I should be using virtual care? When is the time that I should go to urgent care? What are the circumstances under which I would go to the emergency department? Because it's that serious. And then which emergency department would I go to? I said this earlier in our show. The more proactive you are, the more planning you do, the better outcomes you will have.
Got it. Okay. There are a few things from the 6 pillars that I've taken away from it. I just want to make sure that I got the right things, and tell me what I missed. First thing, sleep, and have like a sleep plan almost, but do not cut your sleep short. And that's something to prioritize. Second thing, as I told you, I've now learned it's about, for me, eating more protein. That doesn't mean it's for everyone, but the incredible importance of protein, and then thinking about sugar and making sure you don't have more sugar than you need. Resistance training, something called eustress, which, by the way, sometimes in this show it might be YOU stress, but it's not normally. It's eustress, EU stress, which is that there's actually a right amount of stress. And that you and all my other friends have actually been, friendship is really good for your health, which is great to know. And then last thing that we all need to have a primary care physician.
I think it's great. I think you summarize the 6 pillars of health. The one thing I would add to it, and we talked about it, is the importance of tracking things. Okay. Now, there's that saying, you can't manage what you don't measure. Okay. And then people will immediately go off into, is that a good idea or a bad idea? Okay. And I think the answer is it can be both, right? Sometimes it's a good idea and sometimes it's a bad idea. When you drive metrics too much, you really can track all of them, whether it's sleep, diet, exercise, even stress. Relationships can be tracked, and we should do that. And then you sort of put it into the right context.
Kevin, as we've been talking about this show, you and I have come up with hundreds of topics of things that we want to talk about. But what we really want is to hear from you all, the audience, what you want us to talk about. So I'd like to ask you, please go to the comments section on YouTube of Sick Health with Kevin Ban MD, and please let us know, what do you want us to, what are the things you're thinking about? What health topics, what healthcare issues are you dealing with? And we will try and address as many of them as we can. Okay, and the way we're going to end this show is an idea of Kevin's that we're going to try out. We're going to see if you guys like it. And if you do, we're going to keep doing it. And if you don't, maybe we won't. And that is something that Kevin, it's a practice that Kevin actually does and has done for a long time with his family.
Right. So we call it sharing beauty, probably for 10, 12 years now. Whenever we see something beautiful in my family, I have 2 kids, married, we call it out. And so if you're, driving down the highway and you see a beautiful sunset, it's like, hey, sharing beauty. We do the same thing with videos. We have a family chat. And we drop it in there. So there was something I saw a few weeks ago that just really gave me goosebumps. And it was Victor Ray. And if you don't know who Victor Ray is, he was born in Uganda. He grew up in Newcastle, England. He's a singer, and all he ever wanted to do was sing. And so he went to London, where he hoped to go to school to study that. And he started busking, something I didn't even know that was, but that's singing on the streets. And he became really popular. And now like over 2 million people follow him because he's got such a beautiful voice. And I came across a video of Victor Ray with Teddy Swims. Now, Teddy Swims is the R&B singer, really super talented. And they started busking together. And they went with that song Crazy, where, what is it? Gnarls Barkley did that song. It's such a beautiful song. And so we're going to drop that. We'll have Chev drop that into the show notes, and it's 3 minutes of your time, but it is so beautiful. And I really want to point out how they look at one another, and they're so appreciative of one another's talents. So Alex, let's end here. I'm with you. We want to hear back from you to know what you want to hear about. And in the meantime, thanks for being with us. We'll see you next time. Now, here comes the disclaimer. This show's content represents the personal opinions of Alex Wallace and me. It is not intended to be a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment, and does not create a physician-patient relationship with me. Always seek the advice of your physician or other qualified provider with any questions you may have regarding a medical condition or your general health.